Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Crosby, and I am a past chair of the NCBA Paralegal Division and am a business paralegal at Ward & Smith in New Bern. On behalf of the Ethics Committee of the Paralegal Division, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation on artificial intelligence. The Ethics Committee is planning some interesting Power Hour presentations in 2024, so please stay tuned. We're looking forward to what's coming up. If you have any questions during this presentation, please put them in the chat box and we will try to answer them probably at the end. Today's guest speaker is Angela Dowdy, who is an attorney with Ward & Smith in New Bern. Angela is a North Carolina State Bar Board Specialist in Trademark Law and a Certified Information Privacy Professional, United States, who also serves as the firm's Director of Legal Innovation. And she is the Practice Section Leader of the Intellectual Property Section. Angela serves as the Ethics Committee Chair of the NCBA's Intellectual Property Law Section, and also serves on the North Carolina State Bar Board of Specialization, Trademark Law Committee. She has white belt and yellow belt certifications in Legal Lean Sigma and project management from the Legal Lean Sigma Institute. All of this means that Angela is innovative and looks for ways to improve and streamline processes at the firm. She is a great person to present on artificial intelligence and law firms. Welcome, Angela. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. So everybody's heard the buzzword artificial intelligence. I don't think that you can turn the television on without hearing about it. But really AI has been around for decades. It's all around us. We're being monitored by it right now. You were probably tracked by it this morning. Examples include maps on your phone. For example, I come to Raleigh every Tuesday, and then I go home to New Bern every Thursday, and I get in my car, and if it is a Tuesday, my phone is going to tell me how long it's going to take me to get to work, and it's going to give me the Raleigh address, and same thing on a Thursday. So this AI, the Siri, the Alexa, we all have the convenience of facial recognition. This is all artificial intelligence that's been around for years, decades, really. But what we're looking at in terms of what's changing, right? And so that's really been what's in the news recently. And so AI, as we traditionally thought about it, is more of a technology that has the ability to perform tasks of humans, but that is not the same as what we're talking about when we say generative AI. So today's AI is mining data from our own actions and then really just predicting what we're going to do based on that data, right? It's analyzing data, patterns, and then predicting a future behavior. Now, it can learn from that data over a period of time, but it's very narrow. And these traditional AI tools fall into generally three categories: classification, automation, or prediction. And they're all really around one single function, right? When you talk about face recognition on your Apple phone, that is a completely different AI tool than the AI tool that tells you how to get somewhere on a map versus predicting where you're going to go on a certain day. So there's very specific constraints and limitations around this traditional AI that makes it less intimidating for most of the population. These applications are not, quote unquote, thinking for themselves. They're still simulating a human behavior, but it's all based on a set of rules, parameters, and contexts that the humans have implemented on this tool. And it's not going to go outside of that well-defined box of limitations. So what's changed? Like, why are we hearing about all this now if it's been decades, in our lives? And it's really tied to the launch of ChatGPT. And that was in November of 22. I can't believe it's been that long, but it's been that long. And really what ChatGPT did was introduce to the general population a new type of AI tool. And it's a generative AI tool, and it made it very widely available to everybody. And what makes it different is, unlike these traditional AI tools, generative AI is generating, it is creating new. It does things like create text and speech and images. It can do videos. It can create code. There's a lot of debate as to how original this content is, or the newness of this particular content, because in reality, these tools are creating this content based on the earlier creativity of somebody else, right? What it is doing is, instead of being constrained to very defined rules and limitations, this generative AI like ChatGPT and even some of the very specific legal applications, is it's tapping into massive repositories of content, and then it analyzes patterns, it analyzes data sets, but then what it does is it mimics human creativity, either through a style, through a communication structure. I mean, when you think about some of your favorite people that you watch on television, right? They all have a certain style, or they speak in a certain way. They use certain words. AI can now predict that and create responses in that, and it's creating that new content. And so this generative AI is used in a variety of different areas to solve a broad range of problems, right? So it's applying knowledge, data, patterns in a different context than what your traditional AI is doing. And it's not restricted to a single function. And that's a lot of what scares people that want to know about generative AI, but also are afraid to tap into it and play with it. It operates by training on large data sets, right? So by the time you tap into a generative AI program, the training data that it is using is very different than the very narrow data that you have on your phone, right? It's not predicting that I'm going to Raleigh because a majority of the population goes to Raleigh on Tuesdays. That original traditional AI is predicting it because of my past behavior. Generative AI is much broader, and it has a much larger data set to pull from. And so it's looking at, how does a lot of the population talk? What are a lot of the population creating? And then it's predicting what would be a useful creative content to your question. And it does this through what's called large language models. And really what that means is it's been trained on a large data set to understand how humans communicate, so that you can communicate with the AI in the same way. So the objective for this new generative AI is to create technology that can reason and think like humans, not just predict human behavior or actions, but actually think in the way that we think, and then create content in response to our particular questions. It interacts in a very conversational way, in the same way that you would talk to a friend or colleague. And this is really what makes generative AI so different and more powerful, but it's also really creates the risk factor. Traditional AI, you know exactly where the data is coming from. You can put parameters around it. With this generative AI, and right now we're talking about just open, like ChatGPT, Google Bard. We'll talk a little bit later about very nuanced or specific licenses, such as the new Westlaw and Lexis and these vendors that are coming out with their AI. But generally speaking, what most of the population is seeing is just generative AI, I consider it in the wild. And in the wild, to me, means you have no idea how it was trained. You don't know what data sets that it has access to. And so this creates that risk in a technology that we haven't really seen before. But it has a lot of strengths. Generative AI has an ability to very quickly amass, synthesize, and generate content. And I akin it to a calculator, right? A calculator is very quick. It's faster than any human brain. But unlike calculators, which have a very rigid mathematical algorithm, and there's only one right answer, generative AI tools, they're trying to replicate human reasoning. And since we all have different reasonings, we would all give different answers. It gives these responses, it creates this content without thinking about the limitations to its training already. So if any one of us had the ability and we went into a medical library and we read all the books and we had a lot of information in our head, we would still not feel qualified to diagnose a medical condition or, perform surgery. But generative AI is still a machine. And so there's that, it does not have that recognition of what those limitations are. So when these large language models are trained on these large data sets, it's a wide variety of sources. And it is still an algorithm, right? It's a probabilities of patterns and sequences that creates the content. But there's billions of parameters and there's unstructured data. And it makes the output, especially the accuracy of the output, very difficult to assess. So when you're looking at ChatGPT, you can't check sightings. You don't know what websites it does and doesn't have access to. You don't know who entered that information. On the other hand, if you have what we consider more closed generative AI, that it's secure, you're paying for it, you know exactly how it was trained, the data sets that are being entered into it, that's going to give you much better content. And so really for generative AI, it's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. And the line to define where this is scary versus not scary is, do you know what garbage is in there? And if not, you don't need to rely on it. Doesn't mean you can't play with it. Doesn't mean that you can't access it and see what it says, but you just can't rely on it. And this is where we're getting into a lot of our risk areas that you're seeing in the news. So the first thing, and this goes back to what we were just talking about, generative AI doesn't fact check. It doesn't shepherdize. It doesn't even attempt to rely on valid or legitimate sources. It could just, in the same way you could go out and Google something and you know that different sources have more reliability, there's no assessing of that. It's just a massive amount of data getting pulled in regardless of the validity of that source. And the system is provided to train a response. So every machine, if you will, has a purpose. And the purpose of generative AI is to generate a response to a user's prompt. And many of these platforms are also general use, which means they lack a lot of the industry nuance or context, or they'll have limitations through a particular date. Not all platforms are great about letting you know that. So there's got to be a lot of research on the front end before you start actually relying on the tool to know where that information came from. Which you've seen a lot of. I think Michael Cohen's attorneys just got in trouble for it about a year ago. An attorney in New York got in trouble for it. These systems will hallucinate. So not just inaccurate or false information that maybe it got from a source that wasn't reliable. It wants to give you an answer so bad, it will fabricate information that it sounds like it could be right based on all the other information out there. And we'll do an example at the end that shows how these hallucinations get put into the document, and sometimes they're helpful and not, but you have to know where that information is coming from, because again, all of this wording, all of this output is based on the highest probability of responding to you successfully. And to ChatGPT or other generative AI, successfully means giving you an answer that sounds right. Doesn't necessarily mean giving you the right answer. And then the last piece, and this one is actually close to my heart as a privacy attorney, the privacy and security issues around generative AI, a lot of it is still unknown. People Google things all the time. They don't think about what they're putting in the system, but Google isn't so much learning from everything that gets put in there. Generative AI tools require data and information to better their probability. So the more times a question is asked, the more times it can refine its response. And so you need to have the assumption that whether it's a paid app, a plugin on your website, ChatGPT, anything that offers an AI tool, especially a generative AI tool, They're going to learn from your data and questions. They're going to store all of that information. And the business model for a lot of these platforms, especially the less expensive ones or the free ones, they're selling that data to the highest bidder, which of course is a gold mine for the same reasons Google Analytics is a gold mine. These generative AI tools aren't just what are people searching for, what are people curious about. This is giving very specific questions that people are asking, which of course marketing companies would love to know how to solve your problems and then sell you a product. So this is a particular concern with this open. Where we're seeing the legal industry go and where a lot of this can be, what I would say, avoided, is what I would consider a closed generative AI. And that's really from a paid service provider or a vendor or add-ons that vendors have control over. And you can negotiate within the contract what they can do with your data, whether it's anonymized or not, how you can protect your clients. You also, when you think about vendors like Westlaw, we're used to, and we already know that they're reliable. So if we were to use a generative AI tool that was provided by Westlaw or had access to Westlaw, you kind of get the feel for, instead of just, okay, here are all the cases that may be applicable based on this one buzzword, this generative AI in this closed system, in this closed data set that we trust, can provide you a lot more than just, okay, here's a ranking of cases based on the number of times your buzzword appears in this particular data set. So despite a lot of these concerns, and everybody's best efforts, obviously, to remain within the ethical guidelines, we can't ignore that generative AI is much more powerful than a lot of the tools that have come out, at least since I've been practicing. Think about, this is going to shift practice in the same way that when we went from typewriters to computers, we went from letters to email. There are always going to be a contingency of people who say that's never going to catch on, right? When I started at the firm, there were attorneys that still didn't have computers on their desk because they were convinced that email was not really for practicing law. And, or if they had one, it was used for internal things, but still everything was in a letter. I can't think of the last time I wrote a letter and actually put it in the mail. Like, even if I do a letter, I attach it to an email, right? So this is what we're thinking about in terms of these generative AI tools that are going to extend beyond mere automation, the data extraction tools that we use a lot today. This is actually going to be a tool that augments our practice. So we can all put our heads in the sand and say, this is scary, I don't want to do it. Or as our firm has done, and I know a lot of other firms, we're trying to face it head on. And so we're trying to understand what are some of these legal trends and what are the challenges. A lot of these tools, what I tell the attorneys that I work with, are just that. They're tools. And so what I would like to see them do is enhance our legal practice, right? So we can focus on the valuable, fun aspects of what we do. We focus on problem solving instead of reading through 15,000 emails just to understand what the problem is, right? Like, if you had a tool that could reliably go through the emails that I'm going to have when I get off an hour call, that we're all related, and it could summarize what the client's issue is, I could spend more time solving and doing strategy around that than just reading the emails, right? I can focus on the analysis and the strategy instead of researching to find every relevant case. We potentially have a tool that over time will find those cases for us. And so, we can start focusing on those practical, actionable advice without sifting through all the contracts, all the high risk. We're all looking, you get a stack of contracts and you're like, okay, what are all our indemnification risks? Well, you got to read through all of those contracts. You got to tie them together. Are there caps? Are there baskets? There's all sorts of things that as an attorney, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to read through all of these. These tools are starting to solve these issues for us as legal professionals. So the top areas that we're seeing these applied, and when I say applied, I mean vendors actually have this on the market today available for people to use. Legal research. So again, beyond going into Westlaw, searching for a buzzword or searching for a key phrase like trademark infringement, and it just sends me all of the cases within a particular jurisdiction that has trademark infringement used more than any other case. It's going to go out, it's going to get those cases. And instead of just giving me the cases, it's actually going to prioritize them, because the user prompt, and we'll talk about what that is. I don't just put out there trademark infringement cases for the jurisdiction, and then maybe I'm looking at damages. You're actually going to put the problem you're trying to solve. You're going to talk to the computer in the same way that your client came in and described your problem. You put it into a synthesized word or paragraph. And then what the generative AI does, it actually comes back with a ranking of cases that are most likely aligned to your fact pattern, what your problem is, regardless of the number of times a term may appear. And it will actually have a summary, an answer for you with citing, so that you can go back and check, do the cases exist? Have they been shepherdized? All the things that we would do for legal professionals. And none of this is ever going to be, okay, it's spit it out, go file it with the court, go send it to your client, right? It's always going to have the human component to checking accuracy and making sure that, it is correct. But think of the time that you could spend actually on the strategy and counseling with clients and what I would consider the fun stuff, as opposed to highlighting thousands and thousands of documents and clicking on all the links. Same with drafting documents. Today we see AI for drafting documents is more or less a document compilation, right? It asks you a question, it asks you another question, you get to the end of all the questions, and then you really just have a template with maybe some very specific information tailored in there. This is flipping that on its head, right? It's got a repository of all of these different agreements, and instead of just asking you very basic, specific questions, it is going to generate a very tailored document for you, based on the information that you're putting in there. And a lot of, it can be your own templates, it could be templates that are provided by the vendor, but it's much more broader than what I would consider the fill in the blanks that we have today. Due diligence and e-discovery is a huge place. E-discovery is probably the first place to use AI. But it is going to, in the same way that for legal research has made a lot of movement forward, this e-discovery is going to do more than just highlight for you, oh, this might be an issue, this might be an issue. It's going to summarize those issues based on all the questions that you're putting in. Contract analysis, again, feeding in, you're doing a due diligence deal, you feed in all of these contracts, and you can ask it various questions throughout the process without having to go back and review that contract every time a different question comes up, right? Because nobody can keep in their mind every specific contract, when it ends, when it starts, can it be transferred, does consent have to be obtained? All of these things that we do on the due diligence side that, and I'm looking lovingly at Stephanie, she manages for us. But I remember as a young attorney, it was not the fun part of practicing law for any legal professional. And one of the things, I'm not a litigator, but we watched a demo and I found this pretty impressive, is this ability to predict and do risk assessments from a litigation perspective. So instead of having to read 50 cases and find the probability based on your fact pattern, what your best strategy should be for this particular judge or this particular circuit, generative AI is starting to learn how to do that for us, so that as attorneys or paralegals, we can better equip ourselves to make legal strategies or advise our clients of the different risks that are involved with these different strategies. But all of these tools, again, a lot of people I've talked to are like, but where is my job going? Your job's going nowhere, because this is just a tool like Outlook. Nobody says Outlook can do my job, but I can do my job much more efficiently. And so it's the same. This is still going to require that expertise, especially the emotional intelligence, the oversight, but the value for the generative AI is this ability to analyze all of this data and get these details that as a human eye, you're likely going to miss. And so you're not taken out of the equation, but you're not having to rely on yourself to find every little detail. the challenges that we're seeing, especially in the legal industry, one, I say accuracy. I'm not slamming any of the vendors or any of the platforms. I think there's just a general feeling of how accurate is this and how can I get comfortable that it is accurate? And then those tools, especially in our area where high accuracy and ethical responsibilities are a huge part of what we do, they're going to come at a substantial cost. So there's a huge concern about, the cost of what these tools are going to look like. And then are these tools going to be available to everybody in the legal profession? And if not, if it's only, the big four or the national firms that can afford them, I mean, that's going to affect the quality that can be provided to different clients and their different needs. One that I am particularly concerned over is legal professionals are trained by other legal professionals, right? Stephanie Crosby got me when I was a baby attorney, and I had to go through all those contracts. She had to tell me why these dates were important. It was a painful, necessary process to actually do all of these things. So given how crucial training is to the legal profession, there is concern that these AI tools are going to take the place of certain training roles that get paralegals and attorneys to the point that they can start with these strategies and they do understand the output and they can verify this information. So there's a lot of talk in the industry about what law firms, paralegal programs, law schools, what strategies they have for equipping young professionals, one, to use the artificial intelligence as it's meant to be used, but then also still giving them those skills that they need to be able to effectively monitor and have that expertise to check on these tools. So our ethical dilemmas, we're all in some capacity going to use generative AI tools. And so as long as we understand that and understand that we have to do so within our ethical obligations, despite the fact that they aren't yet widely used, the ABA and a multiple of the state bars have already started talking about how these technologies are going to tie into the obligations. When I first started practicing, there wasn't a technology requirement, right? And now there's a technology requirement. There wasn't a mental health component. Now there's a mental health component. I think in the future, we're going to see that this technology component and competency is only going to get bigger and more intense. And this is going to be not just for attorneys, it's going to be for everybody in the legal industry, whether you're in the billing department, whether you're a paralegal, whether you're an administrative assistant, anybody that touches a generative AI tool is going to need to be aware of what these ethical obligations are. And the top one being, we have an ethical duty to provide competent representation. And the more AI becomes integrated in the practice of law, the more that legal professionals are going to need to know the basic understandings of what is the tool, where is it trained, how is it trained, what does the output look like, how has it been verified, and then the responsibility and accountability. Again, we have the responsibility, it goes to competence, but also ensuring the accuracy and reliability. I would say that this is where those attorneys that got in trouble for submitting fabricated and false cases, it was their responsibility to double check that. Confidentiality and privilege. This has been an ongoing issue, especially since everything went to the cloud. And so I think this is going to be another area of legal professionals are going to have to understand what happens to that data. If you have a vendor in which you're putting in client facts, that's confidential information. You're going to have to know, and it's on you to make sure that just like with the document management systems you have today, your financial programs, these AI systems are going to have the same parameters of security. And then client communication, there's a little bit of back and forth on this, and I think it's going to come out to what type of AI tools you're using. But talking with clients about the risks and am I using AI? Do I think you need to disclose every little generative AI tool that you're using. No, I don't. But I do think there's going to be a level of, if the generative AI system is going to have an impact on the client strategy, the filings, these things that are going to impact client rights. Yeah, I think there needs to be an open discussion, and I'm seeing a lot of engagement agreements from other firms for some of our clients. We look at those engagements for, say, other states or other countries, and they're starting to put this into their engagement agreements to be very transparent about the fact that they're using these tools. Billing, there are certain portions of our practice, like e-discovery, that is a hard cost that gets passed on to the client because it's directly tied to litigation. The amount that is needed for an e-discovery, all of that kind of stuff gets passed on to the client. Where if you think about other programs, like we have a tax program, software program that our business attorneys use, that's not billed directly to the client, right? Because we're using it for lots of different clients for lots of different purposes. And so there's got to be some discussion around, how do we cover these costs? Are they going to be overhead? How does this affect billing practices, right? You've got attorneys that do flat fees now, and so they don't keep time. And then you have other attorneys that keep time. And if AI saves you 30 minutes, you don't bill the client for those 30 minutes. And so there's got to have some of that alignment of how this is going to factor into the overall legal ecosystem. And then lastly, it's bias and fairness. It's funny when I talk to people, they're like, well, it's a machine. What do you mean bias and fairness? And so again, when you're talking about traditional AI, that's just talking about straight data, straight algorithms, it's not creating anything, it's not pulling any creativity from other humans, there's less of a chance of bias. When you talk about AI tools that are pulling from lots of different sources, and those sources have content that were created by humans, and humans are inherently biased. I like the color purple more than I like the color orange. So if I was putting content out there, I'd be talking a lot of purple, and there might be other people that were talking a lot of orange. And so that has to also be taken into account. Like if you're talking about strategies, or you're, evaluating different things or making recommendations to clients, making sure that the tools you're using have as much bias removed from it as possible. And that's not really you having to remove it. It's you being aware that when you're talking with vendors and understanding where these data sets, where these training programs are coming from for that particular tool. So let's talk about how smart generative AI is. And this is a touchy point for a lot of attorneys. I've talked to a lot of attorneys here about this. So while the prior version of ChatGPT failed the bar exam, the current licensable version, ChatGPT version 4, passed the uniform bar exam by a significant margin, better than most humans taking the exam at the same time. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. But before everybody panics, before everybody thinks that this technology passing the bar exam is, dooming the legal profession, I would say, wait, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think it is a very good sign of how valuable this tool could be used if it's done responsibly and ethically. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she has a lot of exams. And I have to remind her all the time that exams assess a person's capacity to memorize and recite information. And some human brains are better than others. Whereas technology excels at aggregating and retaining knowledge for long periods of time. So the more that a generative AI tool is trained, and the better it's trained, the more information that it is going to retain. And so for me, in my, Pollyanna vision, which Stephanie can attest, I don't have very often. I'm a very realistic person. The more you know, right? But we don't have to know it. This machine will know all of these things. It's not to say that you don't need to know how to do your job. It's not to say you don't need to know your profession. but you don't have to look up and know every little thing, right? These are going to be tools that are going to help us. And the thing to keep in mind is these platforms, they're not search engines. So a lot of times when I hear people talk about generative AI, they talk about it in the same way that you would Google, like a search engine. You broad shot, you put it out there, and then you just get a lot of information back. But that's not the case. You do put what's called a prompt in there, and it does go out and it does get a lot of information. But instead of sending you a list of, oh, okay, here's your question, here's all the things that I want you to look at, now form your own opinion, this tool is actually going out and doing that analysis for you. And if it's a good one, it's going to tell you the sites back so that you can double check it. And this is going to be the turning point, I think, for how well people can adapt and adopt this type of program. I remember having to go from book research, to Westlaw and Lexis. And at that time, it was all the Boolean searches and there wasn't any natural language. And then when it was natural language, it was really more about buzzwords and jurisdictions. Generative AI is like your assistant that can read all of those cases for you. So I think the best way to use a tool effectively is to practice and understand. And so that's what a lot of these presentations is why I'm doing a lot of these presentations. It's why we have recommended to our firm. We've done a lot of training about how to use these open ChatGPT type platforms. If we start practicing now and understanding the prompts and understanding how to communicate, when it becomes time, you'll already be in a position of, okay, I don't have to learn how to use the tool. Now I just have to learn how I'm going to implement the tool within my practice and where I'm comfortable. So let's talk about the user prompts, because I will say, I've been playing with ChatGPT since it came out, and this was a hard one for me to acclimate to because we do Google so often, and we don't have to put anything particular into Google because we know Google is just going to spit out everything that could possibly touch what we're asking. Instead, we do prompts, and you prompt a generative AI tool in the same way you would talk to a colleague or a peer, or how your client would ask you a question. So I think that there are about 4 different prompts types, or I put them in this general category. So information prompts or informational prompts. These are the ones that terrify schools. This is why you're seeing all the schools saying no generative AI. They've got all of the students signing all the things that you won't use it. It gives you the information so that you can learn or understand a specific topic faster and in more detail. So in the time that it would take you to read 15 articles, 2 blogs, and a white paper, generative AI, if well trained, is going to be able to give it to you. And we'll do some examples in a minute. It's going to give you the answer. So for example, I was helping my daughter with a book. Now I read this book, but I read it in the early 90s. So there was no way I was going to know all of the information. I put into ChatGPT, summarize the book, and I put in the book name by the author and give me a list of the most important insights with 5 bullet points. And it took less than 10 seconds. Right? So that is an information prompt. You quickly get exactly the information you need. Creative prompts. These are more for inspirational. This is what is terrifying the entertainment industry, and why we saw, some of the picket lines stay out there for so long. It creates content like scripts, blogs. You can say, write a 500-word blog post on trademark infringement in the voice of Beyonce, right? And it will spit it out, and it does. It sounds just like it, and so that is going to be an issue for, I think, more than just the entertainment industry. The book industry, all of these creative areas are going to have to figure out how to deal with. Is it copyright infringement? People are coming on the market with books that sound just like John Grisham, or how these are very big legal questions that are left unsolved right now. Another type of prompt is problem solving, and this is sort of like a creative prompt, but you want a general sort of a listing of what do you think I should do. So, suggest ways to increase organic traffic to my website. And it might give you different ways to improve SEO. It might give you ways that you can post on social media, right? It's just ideas of what other people have said have helped them increase traffic to their website. And then the last is instructional. And this is more of like a step-by-step guide. Like, explain to me how to post a Facebook ad. Tell me how to change my car oil. And it will literally give you a step-by-step list of how to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve without having to read all the books and blogs and all of that kind of stuff. Now, I will admit, even as an avid user of ChatGPT, the content's not going to be perfect. I mean, the better your prompt, the better your results, but it usually gets you 50 to 60% there. And revising is always easier than starting from a blank page. And if you always remember that you have to consider, test, and verify all the responses, right? This is just for generative AI that's out there in the wild. It is a starting point, but you should not rely on it. So what are some of these prompts? Like when I say prompts, and I say a better prompt, what does a better prompt mean? The more clear and specific you are, by naming a book, by naming an author, by giving it the number of words that you want, providing context or examples, open-ended questions. You can experiment with different phrases. We'll show you in a second about some, you might ask a question. It's not exactly what you want. You can continue asking questions until you refine it down to exactly what you wanted. And sometimes I'll start without saying, a specific format or audience. I'll ask the broad question and then I'll continue to narrow it down. And within that same question, not only am I getting a better answer, the generative AI platform is learning what I want from it. And so it's getting better and better over time. So you've probably seen ChatGPT. It's got a free platform option, and then it has one that you have to license. I would not rely on either one of them for accuracy, but I do highly recommend that you get on and play with them. The other is Bard, which was Google's version of ChatGPT. Bard's been out a while and it's more current because it has access to Google's search engines right up till today. But I think that ChatGPT is the more prevalent one, which means it's had more training, which means its answers are usually a little quicker and a little more comprehensive. So for the fun part, I don't know if I will say when I talk to people about AI, especially ChatGPT, people will say, I've not even been on the website. Is it safe to go on the website? What about the app? What am I really going to use it for? If I can't put client information in there, if, it's going to suck my data out, and, why would I even need this tool? So here's some examples of ChatGPT and Bard in action and some of the ways that our attorneys here at the firm are using ChatGPT. So the first one is creating a bio for a speaking event. So it was a cut and paste, but you'll see, I asked it to create a bio for a speaking event, and then I limited it to exactly the location that I wanted it to pull the data from, right? So I didn't say just create a bio speaking event for privacy. I actually told it what website to go to, so that it would know what data I wanted included. And so as you can see, it's very quickly generating. It's running through what it predicts I would think that it would want. And then you can cut and paste that into a Word document. You can manipulate it however you want. Here's an example of Bard. Same prompt, same limitations. It looks like it's taking longer, but I was going to say Bard usually waits until it has the full response. You can then go back in. I put in make it 250 words. I should have said 100 words because I think the original prompt wasn't much more than 250 words. But again, you see how quickly it adapts and starts making those changes. And it's the same with Bard. This was a good one. So we give presentations all the time. I gave a presentation about generative AI, and the theme of the whole conference was spy. And so I asked ChatGPT to generate a presentation that was on generative AI with a spy theme. And it gave me slide by slide themed titles, subtitles, like what the topic should be. There's no way I could have come up with this level of what I would consider creativity in terms of tying all the title slides together, the amount of time it would have taken me to pull all of that together. And we won't do Bard for all of them, but this is also, Bard can do it as well. And then I'm going to pause it here. So I can't click on it, but if you were live, ChatGPT doesn't do this, but Bard does. And if you click here, it says view other drafts. Bard gives you 3 options within your first ask. So to give you 3 different versions of what it thinks that you're looking for. And then maybe I want to also have the marketing team put pictures in there. But I don't want to think about what pictures need to go in there because I'm not very creative. So I then said, okay, include ideas for slide images. It will sometimes stop. If it stops, you just hit regenerate. And you can see it starts describing images that would go well with the title slides that it's already given me. And so once I created my presentation, I sent it to our fabulous marketing department with a cut and paste, and they found images that were very similar to what was described within ChatGPT. It saved me time, it saved our marketing department time. Workflow ideas. I personally love this one because I like logistics, operations, efficiency, all of those types of things. So one example here was create a workflow to manage contract requests. And this was, we were working with somebody that was in-house. And this is a very broad prompt to just say manage contract requests. I mean, you could be very specific as to the type of contract and those types of things. And so the broader you are, the more information it's going to provide you, the narrower you are, the more tailored that response is going to be to exactly what you want. But if somebody just said, what does a contract, management workflow look like? There's no way I could have come up with all of this quickly. Is this the end of it? No, this is just the beginning of it. But that's the point, is that it's just the beginning of it to be tailored, further. So this is one that I love this, other attorneys love this. You have to know what you're putting in. And I will, first and foremost, I have no idea anything about this white paper that I've put in here. I just wanted a really long white paper. So I am not saying that this is accurate. It's just to give you an idea. I've seen attorneys put new statutes in here. I've seen them put in like FTC decisions, to have summaries, to have, bullet points, just to give them an initial reaction to what they need to be looking at. And so in this case, instead of sending it to a website, and it's why I wanted such a long example, I cut and pasted the white paper directly into it. And so you'll see how long it is, and then you'll see how quickly it goes through this amount of information. So I know blockchain, but I don't know blockchain specifically within the healthcare industry. But so it took 100 pages and it got it down to this. enough to make me at least understand generally the paper if I knew the area. Removing legalese. Again, this is, maybe you get, the best example is probably maybe a paralegal is training a very young attorney, and you have to train the attorney on the Lanham Act. Well, maybe you want a bullet point summary of the Lanham Act that is focused for business purposes, right? Because when you're learning an area, you want to know what are the practical pieces of it. You don't always want to know all of the legalese. Was it gonna play? So for this, I said business executive. And so this takes a very long act and it breaks it down into chunks with bullet points, so that maybe if you just needed to have guidance and go through, or, again, you wouldn't put any client information in here, you wouldn't put any confidential information in here, but that statute's public record. So whether I just ask it about it or I cut and paste it in there, it's still all from a public record. Drafting emails. Maybe I read through an email and the sales team is really pushing and it's like 11 o'clock at night and my brain's just not working. I'm not putting any client information in there. So I'm just like, draft an email to the sales team explaining that the contract is too vague and one-sided. And it quickly pulls all of this information. Now, here's one of the examples where I would say it was making stuff up, right? Because I didn't tell it why it was too vague. I didn't tell it why it was too one-sided. And so the example is really, one, it's going to fabricate whatever it thinks it's, most contracts are vague, probably in those particular areas. A better prompt would have probably been to say exactly where it was too vague or why it was too one-sided. And that response would have been much more tailored. I could have been further tailored it to be for the client. And I'll stop so that we can answer some questions. This was a funny one that one of our attorneys did. Their child had just turned 16 and they wanted a car use agreement. And so they put that in. There's another slide. It does very well for translating, right? As an intellectual property attorney, we work with a lot of foreign associates. We don't always know what some of their documents say. Instead of having to wait to send it to the foreign associate, wait for that to come back, you can cut and paste and it will translate it. It is way better than Google Translate. We translated a couple of articles of ours into Spanish, and we have an attorney that her first language is Spanish. And she said not only was it was right in terms of culturally how you would speak, not just a straight English to Spanish translation. So again, a very, very powerful tool. But Stephanie, I know we're down to 5 minutes. So I wasn't sure if there were any questions that came in.
Just one comment from Paul, who says, I have a problem with ensuring the security measures of others' AI tools. Anything can be hacked.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, AI is going to be like any other tool. It's just as dangerous as, any type of software in which you load in client information.
And that's our only question so far.
Okay. Well, we can go ahead and do this one. So if you had a child, like I do, I didn't even know that these existed, that there are agreements between parents and teenagers that you can make your kids sign. And you can do this for a lease, you can do it for a license agreement. This is where a lot of clients, in my opinion, are costing themselves more money because they'll send me something and they're like, hey, I got you a starting point. And you're like, oh, it's going to take me longer to go through and make sure what you provided me was correct. But here we are. It's the same as when a couple of years ago, they had all of the will software put out there and the trust and estates pieces of paper. Like, people are going to be using this, and you can use it in your, day-to-day life as well. This came from our HOA. We've got a very large homeowners association practice area, and they have the joy of reading a lot of the letters that come to the HOA boards. And so we were playing around with ChatGPT, and we first asked it to write an email to the HOA president like a jerk. And ChatGPT said, I can't help with that. I do have some standards, right? So instead, we changed it up and we said, okay, we'll write an email to my HOA president in an angry tone. And ChatGPT was all over that. So you can be angry, but you can't be a jerk for ChatGPT to help you out. This is another instance, though. We didn't say why we were angry. We just said we were angry. And so it made up all of these reasons that we were angry. And the way it does this is the probability of going out into the unknown and coming back. And, you know, these are the most likely complaints that people are going to have with their homeowners association. And then lastly, here's one where it translated, and you can see how quickly it can translate. Maybe. There it goes. So this was cutting and pasting one of our own personal articles, or the firm's article, and asking it to translate, and here's how quickly it is doing it. So pretty powerful tools. Like I said, I did want to save room for some questions. I don't know, you know, it looks like we didn't have any, but this just scratches the surface of AI. This is just some examples of ways that you can use the free generative AI tools to start acclimating to what these tools are going to look like, how to best interface with them. Our firm has seen several demos with vendors, and they are absolutely very, very impressive in terms of the tools that will be available, you know, if we can secure them and if we can afford them.
Thanks, Angela.